Good morning. We are pleased to have all of you here with us today. I am Anton Sayalan, the Chief Evangelist for Luminary Learning Solutions, and I will be the voice of the webinar this morning. We welcome you yet again to the Reset and Go webinar series, designed with the anticipation of getting everyone back on track in terms of mindset. Setting the right precedent is important, and with this series, this is our disclaimer. We are not here to discuss the impact. We are here, however, to contemplate the way forward, and this is the basis of the series, and we are on the last week of our two-week series, Reset and Go. Before we commence our webinar shortly, few ground rules. If you do wish to ask a question, please use the chat option at any point during the session. We will club similar questions. The format of the webinar would be 40 minutes of discussion followed by 20 minutes of Q. And this webinar. The topic of discussion this morning: effective and positive communication during a time of crisis. The qualms about having teams working from home, for managers and for team leads, are productivity and communication, both of which are actually key factors in effective business continuity implementation. But what are organizations doing in order to maintain communication during these daunting times? Heartfelt, vulnerable, timely, factual, decisive, and action-oriented. All these seem like tall orders in communication, but believe it or not, this is the expectation. How are organizations and brands overcoming expectations? Stay tuned and find out as we talk to our guests. This morning we have with us Raymond, Executive Director, AmCham Sri Lanka, Strategic Communication Specialist. Patrick Pereira, Vice President, John Keel's Group, Head of Learning and Development, Cinnamon Hotels and Resorts. And Anup De Silva, Head of Corporate Affairs, Brand and Marketing at Standard Chartered Bank, Sri Lanka. Our host this morning, Priyanganie, a trainer with Luminary Learning Solutions and founder of Accenture Center for Speech and Theatre Studies. He who is quiet, observing silently as always, is Vidusha Nathavitharan, a founder and destiny architect of High Five Consultancy and Luminary Learning Solutions behind the scenes this morning. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and Priyanganie, over to you.
Thank you, Anton. A very good day, and it's lovely to be with you in your homes this morning. Please join me once again in welcoming our panelists, Vrai, Anup, and Patrick. We're taking a look at today, and being the 30th day of April, it reminds me that it's been a surreal time, a crazy time that we've been spending locked down in our homes. While I can tell you folks that there is a bright side to anything, is there any good news in all of this? Is being positive something viable without being conceited? Every day is an unfolding in some form, affecting everyone everywhere. The commonality of this crisis is that the impact is global and our concerns are universal, although the impacts vary by geography and sector. We have also learned in the unfolding of this crisis that there are advantages some companies have, and that is that they have dedicated teams and vendors who prepare year-round for crisis communications in situations like this. But many smaller businesses and brands don't. So no matter what size your organization, one thing is certain. To effectively deal with the impact, organizations need to adopt management adheres principles of good communication. employees and other stakeholders will make long-lasting judgments about the competence and ethics of the management based not on so much of what they say, but the actions that stems from their decisions. Well, in light of everything that has been happening, I cannot think of a better time, a better backdrop or opportunity on which corporate communications can capitalize to push towards positive conversations in keeping with their brand identity. Today's topic, which is about effective communication, we understand and know that established practices of effective communication as a role supports employees' well-being and business well-being. So in that light, what is the role of corporate communication? What are you supposed to frame or anchor our messages on in the aspect of the individual and the organization as well? Right, would you like to dive in?
Yes. Hi, Priyanganie. Good morning. And good morning to the entire panel, as well as to everybody who is joining us today on this very interesting topic webinar. As you said, it is the last day of April. Wow, it's, I think we're, for us as an organization, we actually closed and started work from home the moment actually that the first local patient was identified, because strangely enough, or well, coincidentally rather, our offices are based in the same complex that this gentleman was identified in. So we actually have been in, me and my team rather, have been in lockdown now for well over a month, because we closed down on the 11th of March. So until you said it's the 30th of April, it didn't hit. Not that I didn't know it, but wow, yeah, it's the end of another month. So that in itself is an interesting place to start from. When you said effective communication, and as you've based the topic on today, effective and positive communication, it's a combination. Especially in times of crisis, I believe that for communication to be effective, it needs to be positive. And for it to be positive, it needs to be effective. So it works hand in hand, it works in tandem. And when I say positive communication, I don't mean sugarcoating at all. I'm talking about attitude. I think that what we express, what we communicate to our business partners, to our clients, our customers, to our internal teams, as well as to our external teams that are support network, is all, the effectiveness is based entirely on how our attitude and how our perception and how our positivity is. It's necessary that we are real, but it's also very necessary that we are positive in our outlook. Our strength as an organization, our strength in business continuity has to be based on how we portray our situation. Our situation needs to be realistic. We need to be clear about where we stand. So take, for instance, if you're talking about a manufacturing or, a factory or manufacturing or some sort of manufacturing service, you need to be clear with your clientele, you need to be clear with your partners, your stakeholders, and your staff where you stand. But it needs to be done in a way that they understand, look, I'm with you in this. I'm not just talking at you, I'm talking with you. I think that is one of the key principles, one of the key areas that we need to embrace as communicators, that we need to talk with. It needs to be a conversation with and not talk at. That's kind of my starting point in this conversation today, if you'd like to take it that way, Priyanganie.
Okay, thank you very much. How about you, Anouk? Would you like to lend your thoughts on our opening question?
Sure, Priyanganie. I'll just dwell with, I think Rai captured the essence of how communications should be effective and how it goes hand in hand with positivity and how effective it can be. The topic also talks about in a crisis. So if I just touch on that a bit, I mean, most organizations these days have crisis communications plans. They have business continuity plans. They have basic documents and processes in place to how they should act in the case of a crisis. But essentially those crises are essentially for specific industries or specific companies or internal issues. But here today is a very unique situation that we are in. I mean, if we take the COVID outbreak, it is a crisis that has engulfed the entire world, and everybody is talking the same language. Earlier, okay, we had a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, we had a financial recession, and in Sri Lanka a few years before that, we had a tsunami. But I don't think any of those issues or instances or events took on a global context as what we are in today, where all the countries, the entire world is under lockdown, and we are also talking about the same language everywhere we go. And even when we sign off emails or phone calls, we always say, hope you stay safe and healthy. And it's understood what we mean by that. So how do organizations behave in such instances, and how do we navigate through these difficult waters or difficult times through positive and effective communications? So that's something that companies also would have had to look at and take this instance or take this global event as a unique occurrence and reorganize themselves, reorganize their business continuity plans. We are now getting used to the new normal, which is to work from home. And thanks to the development or thanks to the availability of technology nowadays, we are able to do that. We are able to conduct this webinar through technology. If not, I'm assuming we would have done this at a conference or at a public gathering where there are our audience members are seated in the audience and we are talking on a stage, etc. So the way we do things, the way we communicate has drastically changed over the last 2 months. And I would like to just touch on that point by saying, things are quite different. And how can we be effective and positive in the way we communicate to our stakeholders, to our own employees, to our staff and our colleagues in such a scenario?
Okay, thank you. That was very insightful. Patrick, would you like to add on to it?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. For sure, I think the one thing with this, as Anuk also said, most of the organizations have extremely laid out process now. I work for a company that is extremely process driven. But I don't think most of the processes, if not all the processes that we had still prepared us for this, especially the scale of it and also the speed of how it happened. Started off as a one country issue, and then all of a sudden you sleep and wake up it to be a global issue. And then there was so much of personal was affected, so much of businesses were affected. So we were kind of trying to figure out what's going on in the whole crisis issue as well. So in that, the communication became extremely challenging, even for the most seasoned professional managing communication. Even if you are a business leader, if you are a team member, you are challenged on this situation. So I think that's where the crisis of communication, if at all, if there is one, took place, and that actually brings in the whole effectiveness and the challenge of it as well, or how to keep it positive. Because if you are the person who's in charge of communication, you still even don't know. You don't know what would turn out to be tomorrow. You don't know the exact length of effect. So it's very difficult. But I guess the challenge here, or the way to get out of it, is to make sure that you keep the audience on focus all the time, whether it is external or internal, and keep that audience on focus when you communicate, rather than relying on fact, because already mass media, social media, all of that is flooding you with information. I guess all of us can now write a thesis on how COVID works, but the challenge is how do you keep it relevant to the audience. When we figure that bit, I think the rest of the processes will flow full.
One thing that I might add to what Patrick said was keeping the audience focused. And also maybe keeping the audience engaged, and in terms of your employees, how can you keep them motivated, because everybody is working from home, you have issues, so life is different now, and we are into 6 weeks of lockdown. So how do you keep your employees motivated as well? Something that I would like to add to what Patrick just said.
Yes, thank you, Anuk and Patrick. In some of the statements that you did share with us, yes, you mentioned, Patrick, that communication is a challenge, and keeping the audiences engaged and motivated is also a challenge. Can you give us some insights as to what those practicalities and those challenges are? And also, in light of, have you had to phrase your message in a different way? Have you had to make your communication strategies a lot more different to what you've been used to?
Absolutely. Because now, on a normal audience, when we communicate, as Anuk also said, if we have this discussion on any other day, we would have a house full of audience. We will be comfortably seated on a very much of an interactive way. So the effort that you need to keep your audience engaged would be relatively limited. You are always with them and you can interact with them. There is facial expression, there is body movements. There's so much of communication tools that the school taught us we could have used. But now you're cut off of all of that. You at your best have a video screen. Most often you have your WhatsApp messages or an email. So you really need to pick your words. Or if you're sending a message through WhatsApp, you can't write plenty. So you really have to figure out the gist of what you wanted to say and what's the right choice of word in order to send that message across. And here you need to figure out what the emotion that I'm trying to communicate, what the fact that I'm trying to communicate, what kind of a reaction do I want from my audience, especially if it is an internal audience. You have a kind of an understanding of how the field works, what kind of a culture, what kind of a audience that you work with. But if you're communicating mass, I think the challenge is even bigger. And you are again chartering on unknown territory. So you have to be really cautious with your word. You can't throw out something that you're not sure of, because it can always bounce back and take you to the cleaners, which we also have seen. Anybody from state leaders to a simple organization communicator, when goes and says something that is not so true, the other people would necessarily jump in and take you out. So I think that's the challenge. That's where you have to really thought through and make sure that you figure out what's the mode that you communicate, some of the basic communication principles. But I think here you have to be absolutely focused. On a normal day, you would probably have few channels that you shoot out, and two work, one fail, you still can live with it. But here you probably are limited to very selective few modes of communication. So you really have to be on top of the game for you to be successful.
Thanks, Patrick. I'd like to keep you on it, on your hot seat at the moment, because in your case, your industry has had a massive hit. So what does really positive communication look like? And especially in this time of uncertainty.
Actually, my industry, hospitality and hotels, we were just recovering from the post-Easter attack, the Easter Sunday attack. Luckily, fortunately, unfortunately, we were bouncing back. We saw our reservation situation coming back to normal. Our staff movements were coming back to normal. The destination popularity was coming back to normal. There was so much of positive articles and positioning of Sri Lanka. And then this happens. Now, if it was something as local as the Easter Sunday attack, I think we still had a lot of things in control. Of course, Sri Lankans helped Sri Lankan hotels by increasing local travels. So we had some business going on. And the normality sets in faster. I think within about 2 to 3 weeks of the attack, the hotels started operating back. I mean, the hotels that were not affected started operating from the following day almost. But even the affected hotels, I mean, Sinmangal was one of the first to open even. So we could bounce back because the situation was more local and we could control. I think the challenge here is that this is beyond anyone's control. We don't know the timelines, we don't know the horizons. So in that sense, keeping the staff engaged. Now we have closed almost all our hotels because there is no purpose of keeping them open because of the countrywide regulations doesn't allow you to keep a hotel open. So when you close down a hotel or keep it on hibernation mode, it brings in a lot of challenges for you to communicate, one with your staff. I think that's the biggest challenge. You'll have to ask them to stay at home. And when that happens, the biggest challenge there is how do you keep that reassurance? You're still with us, we are still with you, and we are going to go through this. So in the past also, that's what helped us, even on the Easter Sunday attack, when we had to keep our staff relatively out of the business. The company stepped in, we paid their average service charge. So we gave them that reassurance to say, we will look after you and we are out there to help you. We will do everything within our powers to make sure that we come back. It's little too early still to say how we would go through this because we still don't know our predictions. We only know it will take a lot of time than what it was. We still don't know our, in terms of returning numbers, when would the trouble pick up. Only hope is that China is recovering fast and China produce a lot of numbers to this part of the world. So there is a little hope there. Apart from that, it is still a challenging time. So there is this ambiguity. But what we do is keep the communication open. We get in touch at personal level, at teams level. So each individual department head, the hotel GM, are given the responsibility by the corporate office to keep your staff engaged and keep the communication flow and keep everyone updated. So we have regular interactions through the teams, through all possible means to make sure that we have that camaraderie and sense of working going to make sure that everyone feels that they're still the part of the team and the team is still up.
Yes, that's so true. It's a hard message communication-wise, but then we have to soften it. And with the bank industry, Anuk, you have a different perspective as well, where you also have challenges where service is concerned, because you're a service industry. And so how are you coping with the mechanism of, you know, giving a hard message and yet caring about how you do so?
Yes, Priyanganie. So being in the banking industry, we are considered a critical or essential service as well. So while the lockdown situation or the curfew has been in enforce, we've had to have our main office or head office open for critical transactions. So before I go on to that, I think one of the key areas in communications is how do you build trust? I mean, you can say it's all about brand building, it's about marketing yourself, but I think the ultimate goal of communications is how do you build trust in your organization, trust in your brand, and trust in your employees or your management team as to how they will overcome this situation. And one of those things is how do you, and one key thing in building trust is to empathize with your audience. We need to understand what they are going through. We need to understand how they feel. We need to be in their footsteps. We need to be in their shoes to understand how what they're feeling and how they're going through. Because some of our stakeholders or some of our employees or some of our clients even will be highly affected by this situation. Some of them could have relatives, some of them could have their loved ones who have been diagnosed with this virus. So we have to be aware of these circumstances as well. So as I said earlier, we've had to have main office or head office open for operations for a few hours in the morning sessions. So we've had to bring in a critical staff into work as well. So we had to have various motivational efforts underway to get them to come. And most of these employees came. They are risking their lives. They are risking their health. They are risking their security in order to serve our clients and customers. And it has always been like that from a global perspective. Standard Chartered has just launched this week a program what we call as Give One Day. It will be on till the end of May, where employees all over the world attached to Standard Chartered are voluntarily can donate their salary worth for 1 day, 1 hour, or 1 week for the mitigation of this pandemic or this COVID outbreak. And the money collected through these donations will be matched dollar to dollar by the bank and dispersed among the markets that are most affected by this virus. So, yes, during the last 6 weeks, we've had various ways of, changing the way we work, getting our employees involved, engaged, and at the end of the day, making them come to work as well in terms of critical staff to handle various critical transactions for our clients. So it's been a different way of looking at things, and it's been hard. I wouldn't say it has been an easy journey, because we have to look at the safety, the health and safety of our employees who are reporting to work. And we also have to look at the health and safety of the clients who are walking into our branch or the head office for their critical transactions. So we need to look at both aspects. And I think the team has done well so far in motivating or in inspiring our people to come to work. And all the others have been working from home, supporting our colleagues in various ways through by getting through the system through technology and things like that. So yeah, so it's been a very emotional journey. It has been a very it has been a very emotional and hard journey, but we've somehow are navigating through the waters.
Thank you very much.
Jump in a second there, just to pick up on a couple of things that both Anup and Patrick said. I mean, if you look at communication as a whole, it's basically, you can just split down the middle and say internal and external communication. And both are essential. Both are kind of, as Anup said, it's based on trust. How you communicate needs to, or how your message is perceived is based entirely on how, what sort of a trust network you have built. Two key issues that that kind of arise out of this in the most current scenario, and something that I've kind of been faced with a lot over the past couple of weeks, based on what both these gentlemen just said. In terms of external communication, one thing that comes to mind is in the space of the last week, if I'm not mistaken, there was a news article about a particular supermarket chain, about one staff member being affected. And as usual, the social media gamut kind of got on this, and it started, doing the rounds and, creating panic. And the organization concerned jumped in there and issued a statement pretty fast, which addressed the initial and probably the most critical concern, which was that the message they needed to get across at that point, I think, which was most critical to them, was that none of their outlets were sealed or closed. I mean, not just closed, but sealed, I suppose. In that sense, the messaging there was that we are not quarantined, was what they were trying to say. One thing that I saw missing from that message was the next layer. So in marketing, you talk about a product onion. So it's similar when it comes to communication. You have your core message, but then there's other layers to it as well. And something that I saw missing in that communication was the reassurance that could have helped customers. It was just a clear-cut message, no, we're not sealed. But the additional message of we're here to support you, we're here to serve you, we're also taking care of our employees. All of that, the additional layers of that onion were, as I see it, missing, and that's something that we all need to work on in our external communication during times of crisis. Another, when you come to internal issues, one of the hot topics at the moment is in terms of labor. Unfortunately, that's a huge issue, and globally, I believe the ILO's most recent, not recent, actually, beginning of April. At the beginning of April, the ILO predictions were in the region of 2 million jobs worldwide, job losses worldwide, and I'm sure that has by now, changed even further. And those numbers will be out, I suppose, in the next few days. But when you look at it from an organizational point of view, a lot of the SMEs, a lot of the smaller organizations A lot of the startups, the smaller companies are struggling to survive. The bigger companies, even locally, I don't know if it's ethical for me to mention names here, but there have been media statements out there. A lot of the bigger companies, even here in Sri Lanka, have already issued cutbacks on pay. Sometimes going as far as 60% of your wage. There have been, words like redundancy and furloughs, and these are kind of the buzzwords in the labor sector right now, and it's a huge issue out there. So how do you as an organization communicate as a communications, as your communications team? How do you communicate with teams on things like this? As Anouk said, empathy is essential. And as Patrick was saying, especially in an industry that's hard hit like the tourism industry, how do you tell people, how do you tell the breadwinner, look, we're going to have to follow you? How do you explain what a furlough is? I mean, does it really make a difference that I have my job 6 months on if I can't feed my kids tomorrow? There were recent again media, in the media there was this story where a gentleman had been incarcerated because he had been out on the street, I think, trying to get food. And then there was this whole turnaround on it of, oh, how come he could drive a car and how come he has the finances for a car if he can't feed his family? But the reality is that we don't all run around with, cash under our pillows. You need to get to the bank. Sometimes you need to work on a facility, and Anouk will know the difficulty in the bank needs to also operate, maintain operations, and then people need to have access. So how do you then communicate to an employee? Look, things might not be the same for you tomorrow. And again, like both Patrick and Anouk were saying, it's about the empathy, it's about the trust, it's about how you need to be real, you need to be honest. And again, there's no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to communicating in a crisis. And I think the key thing for us as communicators and communication leaders is to understand that and work with each person and each team that we deal with. Be it internal, be it external, we need to be able to assimilate and work on that basis. I think that is how it makes it effective.
Thanks, Rai. I'm going to butt in because it's halftime, and I'm sure that there must be quite a few of you who have just joined in and wanting to know what we've been speaking about. Yes, it's been about how can we frame effective communication? How do we handle those hard things with soft touches and tones? And there have been a cross-section of, we have the service industry of the bank. We also have John Keels being represented, and also a membership company of AmCham. So the communication tactics and the differences and the areas that they were talking about has a commonality actually, and that is about trust building, about empathy. It's about their people, because it's about the fluidness and the uncertainty on which communication has to be broadly grounded upon. So with that, I have a very interesting question that I would like to bring in here. What we say and what we do in the terms of communications, are organizations being hypocritical?
I think we're all going to be a little silent on that one for the moment. I have to be honest with you, Priyanganie. Talking from a perspective of my teams and my direct contacts, as well as the various. So as AmCham, we're an organization with a membership of over 350 organizations in Sri Lanka. So I'm speaking sort of representing them as well right here. And I have to say that in any of the communications that we've seen, because they share their communications that are going out with us as well, because we share it to the broader network, it's reality. There's not, like you said, hypocrisy is something that's a huge deal. I mean, when you term it as hypocrisy, because I suppose for this purpose of business continuity, you try to sugarcoat it to some extent. But no, that has not been happening here. To be honest, organizations have been, you have the highest leadership coming in and addressing the issues. It's been dealt with in a very open, clean, empathetic manner. I have to say communications have been pretty wow across the board in terms of everything I've seen here locally. Like I said, there could be a little more in the message, a few more layers on the onion, certainly. But it has been clean and honest communication from everything I have seen. Anu, Patrick, if you want to jump in there.
Yes, because I mean, obviously there is something called cause marketing. Every brand stands for a cause. So are these organizations actually keeping to their mission? Are they living up to it?
I
Anu,
guess so.
would you like to take that?
No, I agree with what Vrai said as well, because at the end of the day, every organization should basically walk the talk. You need to do your work and then talk about it as well. I think it's a good opportunity for organizations also to showcase that they live by their brand promise and not shy away just because we have been faced with this crisis. We need to take it head on. It's here. It's here. I mean, it's here, and then we need to look at ways of how we can overcome it and then finally eliminate it from our country and from the whole world. So as organizations, as business leaders, they need to take tough calls and ensure that the message is cascaded to their teams. Vrai mentioned, well, most messages, communications are sugar-coated as well, but here, I mean, it's a worldwide problem. We need to tell the truth as it is. And get everybody motivated and get them together to join hands to overcome this issue. So my point would be to just ensure that you walk the talk. You can't just get your employees to do stuff for you. You have to show it from your leadership. You have to take it. You have to own this issue and ensure that you have your leadership team taking it head on and then leading from the front to let your subordinates or your employees all follow through.
Absolutely. Patrick?
I also agree. In terms of communicating in this crisis, I think the leadership plays a huge role. I also believe while you can build a trust, this is the time for you to demonstrate the trust you have already built in as well. You almost kind of exploit the trust that you already have built in, both with your audiences, internal and external, and you rely on that trust that you built in. Of course, empathy is absolutely key, and we spoke about it as well. Now, on the fact that, say, for an example, of a salary reduction of sort coming place, when you bring that in, you have to be honest about it. You need to bring in the facts. Then also, as Dave on the initial the Reset Go seminar said, when senior leadership shows more action on that, they take a deeper cut and showcase to say, okay, we are also willing to take this hit. The business is taking a hit, so we would like you to also take part. And when that communication is rooted to you with the level of empathy, and also what you see on out there, and then how your bosses reach to you at personal level, have that personal telephone call and say, sorry, mate, we have to do it. I'm suffering, you're suffering, but we will go it together. And if we don't do this, some of our frontline employees, we might have let go. So you are now know that you are actually contributing to a bigger cause, and you are in it together. And that level of trust that you have already built in with your team members comes in very handy at this point of time. And you will have to continue to demonstrate that, even with regard to the supermarket chain of ours, had to all of a sudden move into an online supermarket chain. And there was so much of buzz around that you'll almost be lucky if you get through. But being privy to what's going on the background of it, it was not easy because one, the technological platforms were not ready. We were never predicting this to happen. So a whole heap of technology specialists brought in together. And the technology piece of communication was from our group CIO. So he goes out there and say, this is where we are and this is what we are doing. And this is the level of work that we are doing. So then I believe that built in, and over a period of time we communicate, okay, now we can serve 1,000 people, 1,500 people, 3,000 people. Now we can serve everyone. And that's a journey that the companies have to take. In that, you have to kind of keep your nerves as well. Just because the bus is out there and the social media is hammering you, you have to understand your the real fact. Ducks would only move as fast as they could. So you only have to, do everything within your powers to make sure that you actually take a genuine effort to solve the issue in hand and communicate that. When you do that, I think people get the message, people understand the struggle. While there was so much of criticism, even on the social media, we see so much of praise for the supermarkets for doing what they do, not only for ours, but all for all the supermarkets who actually stepped up their game and did a massive service. If not for those, I think quite a lot of people would have starved at the very initial stage and situation would have got out of control as well. So I think so that's the thing. When that happened, the president of that sector went on even on live media and then communicated to say this is what we're doing. And I think one of the nicest things there is to say you don't need to actually come to the supermarket. You can go to the small shop. Now on a normal day that you are promoting your competitor on a very normal situation. But here you have to go beyond that and say what you honestly can do and then say these are the real causes of it and these are the real solutions to this. And let's get out of it together. So that level of genuinity also helps in this kind of a crisis and to keep it positive, because facts are stubborn and facts are facts.
That's true. Communication becomes sweeter when organizations do buy in on the stakeholder, the employer, the employees and the customers alike. As Anuk mentioned on Give One a Day, they themselves feel, okay, this is our problem as well. It's not just a one-off problem, or it's not something that the organization has to deal with. So in a point of view of protecting your brand, your reputation, how can you really truly differentiate your brand? Anuk, would you like to take that on aspects where you have been able to use communication? How do you differentiate your brand and make sure that you stay apart and you come through in protecting your brand?
It's rather than protecting your, I think it's more in terms of how you communicate yourself, how you portray yourself in times of a crisis. From an internal perspective, how the employees or the team leaders get together and form a crisis communications team or a crisis management team to overcome the internal processes, to change or to change the way things work around, especially in a situation like this where the way you work, the business as usual has changed into a new normal now. So you need to bring in structural changes there as well. I mean, like overnight or within a matter of hours or days, because especially in the case of a bank, we need to bring in special protective equipment. We need to bring in special screening processes for customers who are walking in. And also from an external perspective, it's basically understanding what the situation is and communicating to your clients. Now, since the COVID outbreak came out, the CBSL or the Central Bank of Sri Lanka has given out some regulations, not regulations, but certain moratoriums to clients and customers to overcome these financial problems during this time. So the bank has been excellent in terms of putting those in place and also going a step further and providing added incentives or added benefits for the clients. So it's basically, as Patrick also pointed out, it's basically how you react in this situation. Most of going out of the banking industry, if you look at online food industries, like, most of these companies or supermarkets did, as Patrick said, did take some time because it's a new way of doing things. People are used to walking into a store or restaurant or a supermarket and buying stuff, but now people are sitting in their houses and ordering stuff. So all these things need to be put in place suddenly, where you go from having a footfall into your store, you now have to figure out how you're going to transport all your stuff into the residences or the couches of your customers. So it's basically how you look at the situation, change your internal processes quickly and fast and efficiently, and then communicating it once you're ready. And I mean, there will be glitches along the way. There will be lapses. There will be lapses in various processes, because it's a new thing for all of us. So it's how you overcome these challenges, how you overcome these barriers, and then making things work as you go along, and then being in touch, being in constant touch with your customers, and ensuring that their wants and needs are met. Now, for example, I won't mention names, but when I go on Facebook, I see certain people who go on a major rant about things of not receiving their stuff on time, or in quantities that have not been ordered properly, or they have been charged, or some of the stuff that have been delivered have been rotten. But the very same people 2-3 days later have mentioned, my perspective of this particular company has changed, because right now I ordered some stuff and they called me, and they ordered and they delivered the stuff in 4 hours. It was amazing. I ordered some stuff to my parents who are old in age, and they are unable to navigate these technological advancements of WhatsApping or getting ordered through their mobiles. And they have, while finding out that they are old, they have called them and asked whether everything was okay and whether they needed anything more, whether they could help out and things like that. So as when I see these comments on social media sites and things like that, it is clearly visible that companies in Sri Lanka are stepping up and delivering their brand promise.
Anuk, hot on the heels of what you just said, we have a question here. So how do you drown the noise and not listen to all that's going on in social media? How do you decide what to respond to and what not to? And follow up on, yes, so
please go ahead.
Yes, that is the question that has been asked. I'd like to throw it at anyone who wants to pick it up.
I was actually, okay, I'll just mention a couple of things. I was going to mention this as well in terms of drowning out the misinformation, the negative aspects. We are also talking about positive communications as well. I know it's a bit difficult, but it's from a personal perspective. This whole world, every time when we look at the news, we see the number of infected patients rising, the number of deaths rising. But there is some positivity out there as well. In the case of Sri Lanka, we have, I think, about 140 patients who have recovered and have gone home. So we need to look at the positive aspect of these things as well. It is good to be aware of what's going out there, what's going on in the world, but it's also from a mental perspective, it's also good to look at the positive aspect of this as well. I'll also touch on another example of how people can be quite negative. Now, very recently, we made a donation of medical supplies to a particular hospital in Colombo. They were opening up a pre-COVID ward to test patients or treat patients with pre-COVID symptoms. And then they needed some immediate medical supplies. So we got our management team together and we personally contributed to this. And we went and handed over these medical supplies to the particular hospital. And we were having a chat with the director, the hospital director, and we asked him, "Doctor, what more can we do for you?" And he said, "Thank you. So far, we are okay. We are getting funding from the government, etc." But one other thing is happening in terms of their staff. He said that some of their staff members who live, I say staff members, they are nurses and the doctors who work in the hospital who live in hostels are being stigmatized. Their landlords are saying, you cannot come back to these hostels because you are treating COVID patients and you might be carrying the virus. I mean, come on. These guys are risking their lives and going out to the front line to battle this issue so that we could be safe at home. I mean, and is this the way you treat these health authorities? I think from a social aspect, you need to look at that as well, to not discriminate the people who are in the front line. So that's just my personal comment with regards
to. We're not hearing.
There for just a second on what you just said, Anuk. That's something that's really critical. It's something that we've been hearing a lot of as well. Organizations where there's factory workers and where these workers are staying in hostels, You even have multinationals who have, if you certain food chains, for instance, fast food chains, where a lot of the staff are outstation based and they're living in hostel or dormitory facilities here in Colombo, and they've been struggling both the health sector as well as in these MNCs. They've been struggling where the staff are getting ostracized and whether it's travel, transportation, or whether it's where they stay, they're getting ostracized and they're getting hassled and heckled a little bit. I think this comes right back to the communication aspect of things, because that's based, the fear is real. The fear is very, very real when you have a lack of knowledge and a lack of understanding of what you're dealing with. So again, it comes back to the communication aspect of things. As much as organizations and businesses are working on our communications, the state sector is maybe not. I have to say, when you get on certain social media sites, the state communications mechanism is also very, very strong now. It's much stronger than it was, say, 6 months ago. It's way, way stronger than it was 1 year ago when we had the Easter attacks. It's way stronger. It's way more proactive. There's a lot going on. In fact, even last week, the government launched a separate website for COVID-related information. And all of that is there, but you still have the fact that there is only this much of Sri Lankans who have access to social media, who have access to the internet at all. When you step out of Colombo, when you step further out and go into the rural areas, when there's the information dissemination, especially now that you don't have the newspapers going out. If you driving down a rural area, you will quite often pass a little polla to kade where you have the newspaper hanging outside and you have people going through the newspaper every day. But that doesn't exist anymore. Newspapers have gone digital and we're getting WhatsApp newspapers every morning. So how do people who don't have access to this technology then get updated on the reality and so that's something key that needs to get out there. So as much as us as organizations and businesses are using our resources and our network, I think it might be something interesting for us to chew on as business leaders, how we can help the government in disseminating state information, actual knowledge in terms of where the virus statistics are, what you can actually do. I know that there's a huge amount of shares every time the WHO sends out a meme, or every time someone puts out a meme, there's a huge amount of shares that goes on. So much so that in fact WhatsApp has now, I think, started restricting the amount of the number of times you can forward information, just so that we block out false information out there. But at the same time, effective and positive communication. I keep coming back to those, coupling those two words. And I see how we as organizations can join hands with the state. And we must join hands with the state to disseminate the information as much as possible using our networks. I think, Patrick, you have at your disposal or in your direct and indirect line of communication, thousands upon thousands locally. Anup, for you, it's thousands upon thousands locally as well as globally. How can we use these networks? And we must start using these networks. To everybody who's watching and everybody who's listening in, something to chew on as you go about your day to day. How can we use our networks to disseminate the information so that we cut through the disinformation, cut through the misinformation, and thereby help? There's so much of ugliness rearing its head. Like you said, in terms of this discrimination to those who are in the front line with the disease, but also in terms of unnecessary, racism, nationalism, all these things are also rearing their heads rather. And the bottom line is it's all based on a fear psychosis. Everybody is scared. Now, the latest is that the latest social media outrage is against naval officers. And that's based entirely on fear. So let's all work together in positive communication in cutting through this. I think that's a good thing for us to for all of us to chew on as we go about our day to day, how we can help.
Yes. Thank you very much. Actually, on the 4th, we will have our lockdowns released and maybe aiming at business resumption. So how are you going to keep your customers engaged and responsive, and also ensure that all of this noise is being cut through, and also ensure that your communications are being monitored through? Because obviously, as we resume business, there's going to be a whole new aspect to communication that has taken place prior, and something that is going to take forth in the future as well. So how are you going to address that aspect of it? Have you thought of it?
One option is to keep your brand, your company, your destination. Now, if you look at it from a tourism point of view, is to keep that on the top of the mind of people. So we just launched a small campaign, not a campaign per se, but kind of an activity to where we invited some of our customers to go and share what they have liked about the destination, what they have liked about cinnamon. So you are on top of their mind. You know, we say, okay, you can't travel now, but when you wanted to travel back, you can always come back. I saw another hotel company have posted a beautiful video saying close but not away. So means that you're still there, but we can't take you in, but we are always there for you to come back. So I think the challenge is to keep it going and make sure that you're on top of your customer's mind. From an internal point of view, again, you have to stick true to your values and make sure that those communications continue to work, probably even a little bit more than what you would have done on your normal times, to make sure that people are aligned to business values, to the organizational values, and to the values at large scale in this crisis. Even on the previous topic, I think there is individual responsibility of everyone in terms of cutting out the negative elements of communication. If you stop sharing, if you stop forwarding, then you break the chain. Yeah? If most are doing it, then you break the chain for good. So likewise, both in coming back to the businesses, there is individual responsibility for all of us to make sure that our brands are on top of the minds of our customers and all our partners. And we have an overall responsibility, especially from a tourism point of view, to keep the destination in the minds of the customers and prospective associates of your business. So I think this is more than any time is to have the proper communication, not to necessarily go and market yourself, but to make sure that the larger sense of your business is in the minds of your customers.
Okay, we just have a couple of minutes more and to the close, but of course, Patrick and Anuk and Rai, you can make your closing points, so the participants have an idea of what you would like to leave them with.
So I'll be extremely very short because of the time constraints. I know that the topic is about positive and effective communications, but my last words would be, please ensure from a personal perspective that you leave out negative communications or misinformation or disinformation from spreading. In terms of communications, any person or any organization, you must lead with empathy to build overall trust in the brand, in the company, and in your leadership team. And at the end of the day, I would like to quote one speaker. Unfortunately, her name eludes me, but basically what she said was, before people decide what they think of your message, they decide what they think of you.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you, Anup, there. I think it's you that they need to build a relationship with. It's you that they need to trust before they're willing to listen to a message that you bring to them. For me, I go back to what I started off by saying. It's about effective and positive communications go hand in hand. It needs to be effective for it to be positive, and it needs to be positive for it to be effective. Again, this does not mean sugarcoating. It means being real, being genuine, touching the core of what needs to be said, being empathetic to the person that you're dealing with, but also being very clear and concise. You don't need you don't need to sort of quote your sentences with a lot of words. Be very clear and simple in what you need to say. and make sure that the message you need to get out there is going out there by being as direct and honest and from the heart, genuine as you possibly can. I think that's how it can be effective, and that's how it can be positive.
And Patrick, your closing statement?
Yes, mine would be, this is not the time to be the best communicator you are. I think this is the time to be the best human being you are and the best Sri Lankan you are. So I think if you keep the core of those values in your heart and you look at your communication and everything else from that point of view, I think the communication both will be effective and also positive, because people always, all the time, see the genuineness of people, the communicator, and in the communication. So I think this is the time to stick to your core values, appreciate those values, be the best human being you are, and to be the best Sri Lankan you are.
And on that, we have to wrap it up. I know all good things have to come to an end, but on that those heartfelt thoughts and advice, we thank Rai, Anuk, and Patrick. And over to you, Anton. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Anuk, for joining us this morning and for the brilliant knowledge share that certainly kept our attention. Priyanganie, thank you for steering the conversation this morning. As we look around, as we heard, many individuals, organizations, and brands are adapting to this new normal, which is unfamiliar and riddled with uncertainty. We know that challenging times call for resilient leaders who will cut through the inertia that uncertainty can bring and chart a course for the future. Effective leadership in communication, as we heard, is the platform through which this is achieved. The COVID-19 has placed business leaders in a critical position, and they have considerable responsibilities to their employees, customers, other stakeholders, and at a time when circumstances are in a flux, I think a hard task to embark on for sure. And in the core of it all lies communication. And I guess it is now the time when great leaders and organizations need to step up and shine through an effective yet a positive communication. The question, I guess, is, are you now prepared? Well, on that note, a heartfelt thank you to the H1 team, our technology partners who routinely go above and beyond the call of duty to make these webinars a success. A special shout out to Lakshmi for burning the midnight oil on our behalf. To you, excellence is but a second nature, and thank you for your tireless support. Today, you've tuned in to the 9th of the 12th topic series. Tomorrow, we'll be discussing effective social responsibility in the time of crisis. Our panel for tomorrow features Andrudha Gamage, Deputy General Manager, HR and Corporate Sustainability for Haley's Plantations. Gehan Mendes, Head of HR for Ceylon Biscuits Limited. And Rai Balsazar, Social Activist and Community Organizer. Remember to log in at 9 a.m. tomorrow, Friday, the 1st of May. Quick reminder that all our video footage will be available on our YouTube channel and social media. Enjoy the rest of the day. Very good morning. Stay safe and stay productive.